Freeform chroma is a very translucent material that requires special attention to detail when gluing it together. Take notice that the way the light hits the chroma may change the color of the material until it is glued together. See how the piece on the right appears darker, but once you trade places, the opposite one appears darker. This appearance is normal and will not be visible once it is glued up. Most contractors ask Freeform to do as much of the seaming as possible in our factory, and to also prep the field seams for them, thus reducing the risk of air in the seams. As you can see, we mark the two parts that have been fit together. We will now demonstrate how to effectively glue up a Freeform chroma field seam and show you all the tooling and machining necessary to do so. If you will be doing the prep work yourself, it is necessary to use a straight edge and clamp it to the chroma, making sure your dimensions are correct. You will then route each saw cut edge using a large diameter carbide pattern cutting router bit. Follow up by block sanding the edges with 100 grit sandpaper, assuring the edges stay very flat. Do not roll the edge. The next step is to apply a 4-inch width of tape from the kit to the face of the chroma where the edges will be glued together, making sure you press the tape down with the back side of the razor blade. Take note to wrap the tape around to the back as well for added strength. You will then trim the tape exactly flush to the edge. This will ensure you have minimal cleanup later on. Now also tape and trim the back side of each piece as well. After the parts are prepped, it is necessary to have a very flat and level table to glue up the tops. Place 1 to 2 pieces of tape on the table or subtop to keep the glue from sticking to the table. Make a line 3/8 of an inch from each edge, and using the hot glue gun from the kit, glue the acrylic blocks to the face side 3/8 of an inch back from each edge. Blocks need to have the grooves closest to the edge, and blocks need to be about 6 inches on center. Make sure to sand the back side of each block with the 100 grit sandpaper to rough up the surface for a better glue surface. Hold each block in place and press down for about 10 seconds. Go back and run a hot glue bead all the way around each block to keep it in place while under pressure. Dry fit the seam together. Make sure you remove the rubber pads from the tips of the spring clamps so they will fit in the grooves. You are now ready to prep the glue. This is a 2-part epoxy, so it is critical to make sure both parts of the epoxy are flowing freely. Test this before you put the tip on. Make sure you also squeeze some glue out of the tip prior to gluing the seam. Pull the panels apart about 3/4 of an inch and apply a heavy bead of glue to each side of the joint. It is necessary to get 100% glue coverage on the joint to eliminate any air in the seam. Push the panels together, allowing the glue to ooze out from the face of the panel. Make sure the edges are flush and the back of the material is flat on the table. Use the spring clamps to clamp the joint together. You can also use pipe clamps instead of clamping blocks and spring clamps if both ends are able to be clamped. This is not typically the case for field seams. Notice there is not much pressure on the pipe clamps. You just need enough to remove any air from the seams. And an added tip, you can look through the tape on the joints to see if there is any air in the seam. If you do see air, you will need to apply a little more pressure to the clamp until the air is gone. Make sure the joint does not shift when clamping. It will take between 30 to 60 minutes for the glue to cure enough to remove the blocks and glue bead. After about 30 minutes, you need to feel the glue bead, and when it cools down to about room temperature, you are ready for the next step. Use a putty knife and hammer to remove the blocks from the face of the sheet. Next, use a chisel and tap it under the glue bead, and it will start to shear the glue line. You can then continue to remove the glue bead from the face. You can also route a 1/8 inch radius on the top edge for countertops if desired to soften the edge. This is preferred for countertops and tables. Now you need to let the glue cure for about 1 more hour. Time will vary depending on the room temperature. And then you are ready to start sanding the face and edges. You are now ready to remove all the tape from the face and back of the sheet. Make sure you are very careful in removing the sheet as the glue is not fully cured. Do not flex the material at all. Having patience is key to sanding chroma. Never use a belt sander or any sander that will produce a lot of heat while sanding. Heat can cause the material to craze and will ruin the entire sheet. You should start with 100 grit sandpaper on an orbital sander and sand the tops until you feather out any uneven areas. Next, go to 150 and then 220 grit sandpaper. The 220 grit is the final sand. Keep the orbital flat at all times and use your hand to feel the joint so that it feels flat with no waviness. You may have to let the material cool at times during this process or use a wet rag to cool it off. Wash the counter down with clear water until all the dust is removed. Use only mild dish soap and water to clean chroma. Never use any chemicals at all as it may cause the material to craze. You can now glue your chroma top to the substrate using either a clear VHB tape or clear silicone, and it will be ready for use. Chroma does have a renewable surface that can easily be resanded with 220 grit sandpaper that will remove any scuffs or scrapes during normal use. For any additional questions, you can visit our website or call our tech support team